God gave us a clear mission, and God wants us to pray and to work. There is a quotation that says, by thousands of voices all over the earth, the warning will be given. Miracles will be wrought. When? Sick will be healed. When? Signs and wonders will follow the believers. When? Read the first sentence. When you go and work, then God goes with you. He says, go and I will be with you. When you go and work, God is going to perform miracles. Don't expect God to do miracles for you. God, help me with this, help me with job, help me with health. You need to go out and work, and then God will perform miracles. Miracles are not to help us have a comfortable life. Miracles are to help us save the lost. Jesus didn't say to Lazarus, wake up so you have another 3 miserable years of life, and then you die again. He said, do that so they may know that you sent me. The reason for miracles in Jesus' life was that the others may know and be saved. Miracles are to save the lost, not to help the faithful to have a better life. Christ has left heaven to come and save. The Lord is not pleased with our weak, inefficient efforts. Whatever you do for the salvation of souls should be done with zeal and devotion. We must work with the same earnestness that Christ worked. We must put intensity and perseverance. Yep. I think, church, that we got so comfortable and so self-centered that we forgot that we are supposed to bear fruit. And I am afraid that God needs to give us the warning. Jesus is coming. If you don't bear fruit, you'll be cut off. Let me give you the answer, actually. By the way, there is a wonderful Bible verse that you know. All authority has been given to me. Go. You don't wait for them to come to you. You go out to them. Jesus didn't say, wait, when they come, tell them. Go. And if you go, I will be with you always. So, those who walk in the light, those who indeed walk in the light, are filled with a desire to share the light. They become light bearers. The work that the disciples did, we are called to do. Every Christian is to be a missionary. The Spirit of Christ is a missionary spirit. The very first impulse of a renewed heart is to bring others to the Savior. Listen, folks. As soon as you use what God gave you, God calls angel Gabriel and says, Gabriel, come here. And Gabriel comes to the Father and says, yes, Lord, what do you want me to do? Do you see Jimmy? He used in faith all the resources I gave him, not 10%, 100%. He used his time, he used his gifts, he's all about saving. He's not selfish, he's detached from the love of money, love of stuff. Do you see Jimmy? I want you to give him a lot more. You can trust him with more because Jimmy is not selfish. Jimmy is going to use it properly. You can give him unlimited. Focus on him and bless him and do miracles. It's safe to give it to him. You follow me? Or God says, do you see that guy or that guy? Don't give him more. He's selfish. He's going to use it wrong. That's the way I see it. It's not a matter of being rich or poor. It's a matter of being selfish or selfless. Trusting God or not trusting God. That's the whole point. So, I'm going to give you an example. March 13, 1964. You heard the story of Kitty Genovese. How many of you know the story of Kitty Genovese? Kitty Genovese, from her comes the Genovese syndrome or the bystander syndrome. Kitty Genovese was stabbed 102 times by a guy, and 37 neighbors were at the window watching how she was stabbed, and she was, help, 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 screaming for help. And one neighbor opened the window and said, leave her alone! And the guy ran and then the neighbor entered back in the house. And the guy came back and kept stabbing her and then abusing her. And every neighbor, noticing that there are so many watching, thought somebody called the police. And nobody called the police. That's the bystander syndrome. Somebody's going to do it, I don't have to do it. And she died with 37 people watching. And it's called the Genovese syndrome or the bystander syndrome. When you watch and do nothing, God is tired of Genovese syndrome in the church. Bystander syndrome. God expects fruits. God expects us to become sensitive to what happens around us. So, how do you get ready? I'm not going to read the quotations because there are too many. Every true disciple is born into the kingdom as a missionary. Listen, folks. Either we participate in God's work or we have nothing to do with Jesus. I don't know if you heard it. Either we participate in God's mission or have nothing to do with Jesus. We are not Christians. Hello? You heard it? Those who don't act are not Christians. Listen, let me explain now. In Matthew 24, Jesus talks about the destruction of Jerusalem and the end of the world. You remember? That's our last two sermons. And Jesus answers their question, talking about two different events. Destruction of Jerusalem and end of the world. And then he tells them how to prepare. And this is our answer for today. Focus carefully. He tells them how to prepare. How do you prepare for the destruction of the world, for the end of the world, for the second coming? How do you prepare? You raise your eyes and wait. How do you wait? You do nothing and wait, stand by and Genovese syndrome? How do you wait? And Jesus tells them how to wait. As soon as he is done talking about the signs of the times, the signs of the end, Jesus tells them a parable so they know how to prepare. And Jesus says, there was a master who went to his servants and he gave to one 5 talents, to one 2 talents, and to one 1 talent and said, go out and use it. And then the master came back. And what happened? I'm sorry, it's a different story there. I'm wrong. He told them to feed the other servants, you remember? And the master was late. And some of them were feeding the servants, and some of them said, hey, he's late. And they stopped feeding the servants, and they start to abuse them. And he came back. And those who fed, who served, were called into his kingdom, and the others were destroyed. How do you get ready? And then he continues the second parable, 10 virgins. And he says, all virgins were asleep, all virgins were waiting, all virgins expected the second coming, all virgins expected to enter the wedding heaven, all fell asleep, and that's bad, but that's not the biggest problem, because all woke up. And the biggest problem is that 5 of them didn't have oil. How do you have oil? And he gives another parable. And he says, he gave to one 5 talents, to one 2, and to one 1. Those who used their talents, God multiplied. And he said, good and faithful servant, well done, come into the kingdom. And the others, unfaithful servants. How do you prepare, folks? You see, how do you watch and wait? You serve. How do you get oil? You serve. How do you multiply your talents? You serve. Those that do not serve are lost. You don't wait for Jesus doing nothing. Just because you come to church, you are not waiting. Everybody goes to church among Christians. You don't wait for Jesus because you keep Sabbath. You should keep Sabbath, but that's not the way you wait. You wait for Jesus working. You preach the gospel. That's what Jesus gave us. The Great Commission is not the Great Suggestion. How do you wait? Work. Bear fruit. Bear fruit. The king said, okay, and Jesus ends chapter 25, and this is the key. After he talks about the second coming, and he talks the 3 parables, he ends with a judgment. How do you wait? The king is going to divide them into groups. And the king is going to say to one group, come into the kingdom because you kept Sabbath, you went to church, you paid tithe, and you did evangelism. Too many times we are satisfied for doing that. He's going to say, come into the kingdom because I was, how? Poor, I was thirsty, I was hungry, I was naked, I was in prison. And they say, when have we done that to you? And he says, every time you do it to them, you did it to me. How do you wait? How do you prepare? How do you have oil? How do you multiply talents? Do you follow? You do it to them. You use what you have. And then the others, Lord, we have been going to church. We perform miracles. I don't know you. Because I was and you didn't. And when you don't do it to them, you don't do it to me. Folks, do you see how you prepare for the kingdom? Not being bystanders. Not being the fig tree that has no fruits, only leaves. You prepare by serving. And folks, it's not about money. God doesn't have a money problem. God has a people problem. God calls you to do small acts of service, daily service, using whatever you have. Open your eyes and what you have, share. Pray in the morning. Lord, would you give me opportunities to share today? I give you an example. You remember I told you me going to the vet and praying that God would give me an opportunity? When you pray that prayer, God is going to answer. And the vet says, hey, we know you go to church, tell us in what you believe, and ta-ta-ta-ta. And I told them, what about second coming? What about the state of the dead? What about pets in heaven? What about? And every time I go, I have to preach. Well. I was supposed to go Thursday to the vet, and they called and I had to reschedule it for Friday. And I go Friday, and the lady, the doctor that is there, doesn't work Friday. And I say, well, she's not there. I don't have to share today. But I did pray, Lord, if you still want me to share with somebody else, help me do that. But nothing happens by chance. They canceled for a reason. When I get there, the owner of the practice, and I'm not going to give you the name, the owner of the practice comes and says, I hear everybody in this practice, all the nurses, everybody, all the secretaries, all the girls, they talk about you sharing with them. And you gave them books, and you know what? How can you do that in my practice without me knowing it? I said, man, I'm in trouble. And I pray in my mind, and he says, you need to tell me too! I said, oh, okay. I said, you know, it happens that I have with me some books and some, I want to read them. Tell me what you believe. Tell me why you believe. Tell me, and we talked about prayer, and we talked about second coming, and we talked about the 10 Commandments, and we talked, and I was like, man, I don't want to preach to you. He says, I asked you, keep saying it. And he stood on that steel table that he put the pet on, he lowered it down, stood on it, and we talked for 2 hours. And I said, man, it's Friday, I need to prepare myself, I need to get ready for Sabbath. And he kept asking, and we talked and talked and talked. And now I know why they rescheduled it for Friday instead of Thursday, because the owner had to know about it. And then he said, would you bring me some DVDs? I want to listen. So I talked to Jim. I said, I need the 10 Commandments and the prayer series. And I'm going to bring it to them. And then he tells me, we lost a child. And my wife is so eager to learn more about prayer. I can hardly wait to share with her at home. Folks, you just pray and say, God, use me. And then watch it. Chandra, I'm sorry, we don't have time, but tell me, are you sharing at work with some people, inviting them over? Is it difficult? Did they kill you? You are still alive? But you are shy, you don't like to talk, do you? Anybody can share anywhere. You don't have to be a pastor. You can share whatever you have. Small acts of service. Pay a meal for somebody, you're not going to get broke. Pay a meal for somebody. You see somebody in line, let them ahead of you. Do acts of service in a selfish world. Do acts. Use the blessings that God gave you. You are blessed. Use whatever blessings God gave you. God didn't give you blessings for you. God gave you blessings that you share. Use what you have, and God is going to multiply. And then you can gain their friendship, and then you can say, follow me. Go to the lost sheep of Israel and tell them, the kingdom is at hand. Heal the sick, cleanse the lepers, raise the dead, cast demons. Freely you have received, freely give. God calls you to serve, to be a blessing. Open your eyes, pray for them, and God will open opportunities for you. Do small acts of service daily. God will make you accountable how you used your talents. Listen, folks, I want to read a few paragraphs. As trials thicken around us, listen carefully, these are key paragraphs. Separation and unity will be in the church. Those who have great light but did not use it will go out. Hello? Those Seventh-day Adventists who take their stand under Satan's banner, what does he say here? I think you heard very well. Those Seventh-day Adventists who will take their stand under Satan's banner will give up their faith in the warning and reproofs. Great issue is so near at hand. Enforcement of Sunday law. That is going to weed out those that were not sanctified and those that didn't receive the latter rain. Soon, God's people will be tested through trials. And the great proportion of those who now seem to be genuine are going to get out. And if you keep reading that paragraph, those who don't work, who don't use the gifts, they will be cut off. They will go out. There will be many people among us who will go out. As the storm approaches, a large class who have professed to believe in the third angel message, that's Adventist, but have not been sanctified through obedience, they will abandon their position and not leave the church, but join the opposition. Some have been shaken by the way. Who is shaken? Listen carefully. The careless and the indifferent. Genovese syndrome. Bystander syndrome. Those who do nothing or be left behind in darkness. And their place will be filled by others, by thousands that will come in the church. Listen, folks. Many are going to leave the churches. Who? Those who do nothing. People who act are people who grow. When you serve others, you grow yourself. When you bless others, you are blessed. And God can use you. You are trustworthy for God to bless you. When you do nothing, eventually you will grow cold. When the persecution comes, you will leave. Listen, the broken ranks will be filled by those represented by Christ in those who come in the 11th hour. Large numbers will be admitted back to replace those who left. God will use ways and means that cannot be envisioned by our power and our mind. God is going to perform amazing miracles to finish the work with one generation. We'll finish the work. But God has to purify the church, and then when those who don't work are out and those who work are in, then we can finish the work. Wow, wow, wow. He will raise up among the common people, men and women, and they will do his work. Soon will be an awakening that will surprise many. Those who don't realize, listen carefully, the necessity of service will be passed by. Who is passed by? I should have underlined this. Those who don't realize the necessity of service will be passed by. Listen, folks, you want me to repeat? Who is passed by? How do you get ready? You don't get ready by doing nothing. You get ready by working. Those who don't realize the necessity of service will be passed by. This is tough. The Lord, listen carefully. Oh, come on, move. It doesn't move. Okay, too much now. The Lord abhors indifference and disloyalty in a time of crisis in his work. Wow. Wow. You want me to read it again? The Lord hates, he cannot stand indifference, Genovese syndrome, and disloyalty in a time of crisis. The whole universe is watching the great controversy. The people of God are ready to enter Canaan. What can be of more importance than to be loyal to God? His special blessing accompanies those who labor. Their work is to catch the light and to share the light. Let the gospel message ring through our churches, summoning to action. Let the members have increased faith, gaining zeal from heaven, a knowledge of exhaustless resources. Those who place themselves under God's control will be guided, they will catch the trend of events, and inspired by the Spirit, they will no longer stand in impotency, pointing to what they cannot do, but they will go forth in faith. They will no longer stay in impotency. Folks, now is the time to prepare. I'm going to jump to the end. Concerning to times and seasons, you don't need to write to you because you don't live in the darkness. You know that Jesus is coming. Listen, folks, Jesus said to them, this generation will not pass before these things will happen. And that generation, for instance, Israel, when they were not ready to enter Canaan, that generation died, a next generation entered. Jesus said to them, this generation will not pass. When Jesus said that, that generation, there was about almost 40 years, and Jerusalem was destroyed. That generation experienced that. And then Jesus talked about second coming because he talked about two things in the same speech, about destruction of Jerusalem and second coming. When he talked about second coming, he gave signs in Matthew 24. Earthquakes, tornadoes, calamities, catastrophes, You remember wars? And then he said, there will be like the labor pain, the birth pain. Basically that means when they start increasing in intensity and frequency, then Jesus is coming. And then he says, that generation will not perish, in Greek. People say that he talks about the humankind generation. I don't pretend I am right, but I believe different. He refers to two different times, destruction of Jerusalem, that generation, and end time, that generation. And he says, when the events, the calamities increase like the birth pain, that generation will see it. You follow me? Well, folks, there have always been earthquakes and calamities. But from mid-80s, the graphics didn't grow like slow. All the earthquakes, all the wars, all the terrorism, everything, the graphics have been going like crazy. From one tornado a year, you have 500 tornadoes a year. From one fire a year, you have fires burning non-stop. From one earthquake a year, you have 500 earthquakes a year. You follow me? Since mid-80s, 1986, somewhere there, it exploded and it started to go, all of them, like the birth pain. I'm not giving dates because nobody knows the date except the Father. But listen carefully. Jesus said, when those happen, like the birth labor, that generation will see the second coming. Listen, folks. Jesus says, you see the fig having leaves, you know the summer is coming. You see these signs, you know the Son of Man is coming. We don't need to know the date, but we do know that Jesus is coming soon because we live those signs. And our generation, you and me, will see Jesus. A generation means 30, 40, 50 years, that's it. It's not going to be another generation. We, in our lifetime, will see Jesus. How do you get ready? You don't get ready because you come to church. You get ready when you go and work.